is the United States needs to get involved in an accounting process. The committee needs to establish the facts, and if the United States doesn't, others will do it. And I have no doubt whatsoever that investigations will take place if they're not already taking place, and that some of these individuals, if they travel outside the United States, will face a very real threat of investigation.
And the legality of what President Bush said, or the implications of it, when he said to ABC News, "We started to connect the dots in order to protect the American people. Yes, I'm aware our national security team met on this issue, and I approved."
Well, it appears to be an admission that the President of the United States authorized torture, that he authorized waterboarding. The Convention prohibiting torture, the Geneva Conventions, are absolutely clear. There are no circumstances in which torture is permitted. And if the account is accurate, the President is in effect owning up to the fact that he has committed a war crime. And under the Torture Convention, there is an obligation to investigate any person who has committed a war crime. So it was a very surprising admission. I wonder if it was fully thought through. If it's accurate, it is deeply disturbing.
Philippe Sands, you talked in your testimony before Congress about torture and what Britain learned in its fight with the IRA, with the Irish Republican Army.
Yeah, in many ways, that was actually the most interesting exchange that I had, because I had it with some seemingly very sensible Republican congressmen who were very interested and came up and talked to me about that afterwards. What I shared was that the experience of Brits across the political spectrum, it's not a left-right issue, as I explained, drives from the experience we had in the early 1970s, in which the United Kingdom moved to aggressive interrogation. And they used pretty much the same techniques of interrogation: hooding, stress, humiliation. And it backfired terribly. On all military accounts, it extended the conflict by between 15 and 20 years, because it creates such resentment in the community that is associated with the people who are being abused, that it served to generate further opposition and people moving to violence. So basically the message is, it doesn't work, and no one in the United Kingdom, literally no one, from any of the main political parties or across the political spectrum, will in any circumstances support what has been apparently authorized by the President in this country.
Philippe Sands, I wanted to ask you about a report out of Associated Press. A Kuwaiti freed from Guantanamo Bay carried out a suicide car bombing recently in Iraq. The U.S. military said this on Wednesday, confirming what's believed to be the first such attack by a former detainee at Guantanamo. Tom Wilner, Al-Ajmi's American lawyer, said incarceration at Guantanamo may have turned the Kuwaiti into a terrorist. Wilner said, quote, "I don't know whether the experience of being kept down there in isolation radicalized him."
I read that report, and I was this morning, and I was disturbed by that report. I mean, I find that the whole system that has been created at Guantanamo is abhorrent. It doesn't meet minimum international standards. It sends out a terrible signal to the rest of the world. Most of the people, I think, being held at Guantanamo are really not seriously problematic people. But undoubtedly there are some problematic people, and steps do need to be taken in order to protect countries like the United States and the United Kingdom. That said, I immediately, in reading the article, asked myself the question, is this individual someone who fell into that small category of persons who was, as Donald Rumsfeld put it, a seriously bad person? We don't know that, and there is the possibility that the treatment that he was subjected to gave rise to an IRA type of situation, that it so enraged him, that it so enraged his community, that it essentially politicized him and energized him. Of course, we don't know the facts, and I think we need to find out a lot more about the facts before expressing a final view.
You live in Britain. Your book is Torture Team, though, about the United States and international law. The people involved that you're talking about go across the gamut now. A number are out of office. You have John Yoo, for example, who's a law professor at University of California, Berkeley. You have Douglas Feith, who's now teaching at Georgetown. What are your thoughts about this?
John Yoo's dean at Berkeley has been subject to intense criticism for not firing him, and indeed there was even an op-ed, an opinion, an editorial in the New York Times saying he basically shouldn't be teaching there anymore. Dean Edley wrote an interesting letter in which he said, look, there's freedom of expression, that includes freedom of views, and under the rules at Berkeley, you can only fire someone if they've been convicted in a court of law of committing a criminal offense. And John Yoo has not been convicted of committing a criminal offence. And in our system, you are innocent until proven guilty. I've laid out the reasons why I believe John Yoo has participated in authorizing torture, and that exposes him to investigation. But I entirely accept that until he is actually condemned by a court of law, he's perfectly entitled to carry on peddling views, even if I violently and fundamentally disagree with those views. As regards Doug Feith, I spent time with him. He's an entertaining character, but he's a scary character. I've read his book, 900 pages on war and decision, 5 pages devoted to the issue of interrogations, and you read that book and you have no idea that this man was deeply involved in the decisions that I write about. It's spin, it's whitewash, there's a failure to accept responsibility, and that, I think, is what is going to cause them in difficulty, because it's essentially a cover-up.
We invited Douglas Feith on the show, but we didn't get a response. Can you talk about the significance of the 1947 case, United States of America versus Joseph Alstrader?
It's a delicate case. It's one of the cases known as the justice cases, the only time that lawyers have ever been convicted of international crimes for carrying out their professional activities.
Lawyers.
Lawyers. The focus was on lawyers. I included reference to that case in my book because I found it ironic that the theory that lawyers could cross a line and be investigated, prosecuted and convicted for committing international crimes was a theory that was drawn up by the United States military itself. And then we come full circle 60 years on and we find that with Mr. Rumsfeld's hand, abuse is authorized and permitted by the US military in plain violation of international rules, but also in plain violation of President Lincoln's disposition going back to 1863 that the US doesn't do cruelty. But the case is an important one. It's not bang on point, and I'm absolutely not drawing analogies. I'm not saying that these lawyers are equivalent to those lawyers or that this regime is equivalent to that regime. What I'm interested in is the circumstance in when does a lawyer cross a line into criminality? And coming back to an earlier question that you raised, the European judge and the European prosecutor that I met, when I laid out all the materials for them, they came back with a most startling conclusion. They said, Philippe, the bottom line of it is there is no distinction between the man or woman who interrogates and the man or woman who authorizes by law an abusive interrogation. They are both subject to investigation. They are both subject to prosecution. And I think that's the way the law has gone, and it's a law that is right, and it is a law that the United States has helped put in place.
What were you most surprised by in your research for Torture-2?
I was most surprised by the total failure of the upper echelons to accept responsibility for the errors that they have made. If I had met these people, if I had met Doug Feith and Jim Haynes, and they had said to me, look, we faced in September 2002 a situation in which we felt another attack was coming. We had someone who we felt had information. We authorized techniques of interrogation that were aggressive. They may or may not have crossed the line into torture. With the benefit of hindsight, we realize we fell into error. We made a mistake. We accept responsibility for that, and we need to learn not to do that again. That shocked me, and it equally shocked me that they then sought to push the blame of responsibility onto people like Mike Dunleavy and Diane Beaver, people who were doing decent service for the US military and who were unfairly scapegoated. So at the end of the day, it's not only the crime, it's the abject failure of individual responsibility to take full account for what they have done. I find that really shocking.
Philippe Sands, I want to thank you for being with us. His book is Torture Team, Rumsfeld's Memo, and the Betrayal of American Values. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. When we come back, John Perkins, the self-confessed economic hitman. Stay with us.